Welcome to the second episode of the Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence podcast. My name is Alan Seid, and together with me I have
Mattias Rost.
And we are here again to talk about what human-centered artificial intelligence is. Mattias, last time you and we spoke about what human-centered AI means for me. This time I thought we'd flip and talk about what human-centered AI means for you.
Mm-hmm.
And as our background, your research focus is human-computer interaction, right?
Yeah.
And in the last few years, you've been working quite a lot with AI, right?
Yeah.
And I want to leverage your background in human-computer interaction to see how you see the connections between human-centered AI and human-computer interaction. So what are the clear and not so clear connections between those two fields?
That's interesting. That's a great question. Well, I mean, to me, hcai is perhaps the hcai of AI.
Okay. Can you care to elaborate a bit?
Of course, yeah. I mean, it's like it's the perspective on how we should develop artificial intelligence. Like, I'm grounding it very much in what Ben Schneiderman writes in his book and how he introduces the idea of human-centered artificial intelligence, in that like technology in general can be driven from two standpoints. One is just for the sake of technology, like how can we do this and how can we do this better, faster, more efficient, whatever metric we want to have. Like, is it possible to do this? Like, we talked about a car last time, I think. And so we could make a car go fast. And then the question is, can we make it go faster? And how fast can we make it go? And that's one direction. That's like the technology-driven approach. But then we can ask, but how fast should a car go? Like, what's a sensible speed for a car? And that's more of a, I would say then, if you do that from a human standpoint, like for humans, what makes most sense to, like, how fast should the car go? And that would be the human-centric approach. So in the realm of artificial intelligence, of course, we've had already from the 40s, 50s, like, is it possible to make computers do whatever it is we do? And what are those things? And we can try to make technology behave more like what we think our brains are doing, right? So that's one approach. And then, technology development goes down many different paths. We manage to do object recognition and image recognition, and we see how well can we do that and stuff like that. And that's great. And when it comes to computers, can we make computers faster? Sure. And we have made computers go faster. But can we make them better for people? And I think that's where hcai is, right? In general, like, can we make computers faster? Sure. But can we make them better for people? That's where hcai comes in. And so now when we have reached quite far in terms of, making computers and machines get some sort of capabilities or abilities that we would think that humans, had priority in before, can we now make this technology be more tuned to how they should be for people? So then how do we steer technology development from a human-centered standpoint? And so that's what hcai would be for me.
All right. I have many questions following this, so let's just start with. So you mentioned Ben Schneiderman's book, which I think we've talked about it in the last episode, and I'm sure we're going to talk about it in the future as well. An interesting perspective here is that Schneiderman is also a human-computer interaction researcher. What does that do in terms of your experience or your opinions on this? Like, is there too much of a hcai sort of perspective? Or would you say that just adds to the benefits of it?
I mean, is it too much? Of course, it resonates easily with me, coming from, a similar background then, perhaps. If if let's say someone who comes strongly from the AI field, from machine learning, like Jan LeCun or someone like that, if they all of a sudden said, no, we need to start, I've developed this new approach, which is we call human-centered AI, that will probably look quite differently. But it would probably not be as good, I'd say, because I think the key point in hcai is the human-centeredness, not the AI. And so it makes most sense that if someone were to draw up the kind of the guidelines around that idea and drive that development of what that could be, should be from a human-centered perspective, not someone from an AI perspective. Someone from a user-centered or user-driven approach rather than a technology-driven approach. So I think, that's another way of, I guess, saying what this is. So we have AI, in quotes, traditionally is technology driven. And with the introduction of this other idea of hcai, then it becomes user driven. And I think Ben Schneiderman is user driven rather than technology driven. And so it makes sense that it comes from someone who is user driven.
Okay. So let me be a bit, let me stir things up a little bit and ask. So there's a parallel movement to hcai, the entire FACT movement, fairness, accountability, transparency, ethics. And by and large, those are quite, human values. Do you see the FACT movement and hcai as similar or opposing or different perspectives? Like what are the relations between those in your opinion?
I would probably put them under hcai in a way, because that could be part of it. I think, in the book, he talks about it as well. It's like one chapter or two chapters, or maybe a part of the book or something like that. So I think it's under that umbrella. It's a way of questioning and looking at and reason about these AI systems, especially when it comes out in use. So it becomes a really kind of, I guess, powerful tool in the toolbox of hcai. How do we make sure it's fair? What is fair? How do we, reason about an AI system as fair? And what is accountability in this perspective? And transparency and all those things. If you were to purely look at this from a technology standpoint, I think it doesn't make as much sense to talk about it as transparent. Transparent to whom? If you have two chatbots talking to each other, would you talk about transparency? Or does that matter? It's rather like when we as people start looking at, okay, what is it these two entities talk about, that it becomes important then, if you were to consider transparency. Okay, but can we understand why they're saying what they're saying? Or do we understand the same things? Or whatever it could be. Transparency is many more things than that, but as an example.
So am I interpreting it correctly as there being sort of different stakeholders for fate or fact versus hcai, or are the stakeholders on different sort of levels of abstraction maybe?
From my standpoint, fact is narrower than hcai. And I'm pretty sure you can find other kind of strands within hcai that will be as narrow as fact. I can't think of one just now. I'm sure we'll get back to it later. But that will be just as narrow, and it will be something different than fact, another perspective, another idea. The design angle on how should we design systems with, I don't know, some sort of AI capability is perhaps, outside fact. But of course we can apply fact to that as well. But I think that, I don't remember what the question was anymore.
Yeah, no problem. So I wanna continue asking about your initial answer. So you said that a lot of the HCAI research or focus is about making computers smart, or having how to build systems, how to build computer systems that people can interact with in a good way. So is HCAI specifically about computers interacting with people, or is there a different perspective on this?
To make the computers interact with people, and that would be the HCI. Is that the question?
Yeah.
That's an interesting question. I think that I like that perspective. I don't think that's the case at all, but I'd like to continue on that idea. Thinking what that would mean. I mean, no, of course not. Or rather, yes. I mean, is it a computer? Is whatever we know about computer? It's this or electronic machine that we have that can do a bunch of stuff, and as far as we know, all of the AI stuff is running in computers, right? Are they just computers? Sure. But it's not about making. I don't think it is about making machines able to talk to us. Like it's not a reverse HCI. It's not a computer-human interaction perspective where there is a directedness between human and computer. HCI is human and computer interacting. It's not like the human interacting with the computer. It's both ways, right? How do we make sure we understand the computer? How do we make sure that computers, behave according to our intents, whatever.
But so let me sort of, challenge you a little bit and ask, so the human AI interaction, does it need to be aware of a computer? Because now more and more we're seeing, devices or services where these things are ubiquitous. You don't really need a device. It just is there. So we've more or less taken the computer out of the equation. So in the context of HCI, where does HCAI come in?
I think in that respect, perhaps there's nothing different between HCI and HCAI. I mean, in HCI, I think, to me, it boils down to the interfaces. So typically, what we if we look at the design aspect of HCI, like where we design things, then what we design is the interface. I think between two things, or between perhaps just us interacting with the world, but typically that's some sort of technology mediation going on. And with AI, it just happens to be that technology that's responsible for this sort of interactions is some sort of AI system. But the HCAI has to do with controlling or directing the development of AI, I think. So of course, there's HCI in HCAI.
So just to sort of bring up another term, there is a related term to HCI, and that's HTI, right? Human technology interaction. Would you say so? Which of these terms is more related to HCAI? Is it human computer interaction, or is it human technology interaction?
To me, they are not different. I'm not sure if there is someone, who is purely in HTI who would say, no, this is completely different. But for me, they are just the same. It's the same with man-machine interaction. That's just HTI as well.
All right. So I think that this is super interesting because both you and I, we've had in our research sort of user perspective or human perspective, me working on personalization recommender systems, you doing human computer interaction. But it would be interesting to see, from the other side of machine learning or other side of AI. So when we have researchers who are core machine learning, so to say, would you think, and this is of course a very speculative question, would you think that the type of understanding that you have about HCAI and someone like me who also has a user perspective, would those be, similar to someone with a pure machine learning background?
Like what would be the same?
The perspective on what hcai is?
Yeah, potentially. I think, like, I don't see why not necessarily. I think there could be a difference in practice, like how you would approach something from a sort of higher level. But my, I mean, I've just because I have a particular perspective on it, I think everyone just should have the same perspective because obviously it's the right one.
Yeah.
And then the question is it possible that someone to have the wrong one? Of course, but yeah, I mean,
Why I'm asking is it's not about having the wrong or right perspective here. What I'm sort of getting at is that the human-centered AI topic, focus, research area, it's spun out of HCI, or at least HCI close research, whereas Faith comes from initially a NURIPS workshop, I think, on fairness, accountability, and transparency in machine learning, and then it's grown into the FACT conference where there are, HCI type of people or researchers, but it's a wider community where there's more sort of core machine learning people, there's law, there's the non sort of user perspective, so to say, in that topic. So that I'm trying to sort of balance HCAI and fact and figure out what's what, and are these by and large the same communities just coming from different perspectives, or as you said, one being part of the other. So what's your reasoning here? What are the relations between fact and HCAI, user focused versus non-user focused?
yeah. I mean, my first instinct is to question whether there is an HAI community. I'm not sure if there is one yet. It's probably more composed of several, different regions and areas around that, and perhaps there will be like a big HAI community where everyone will, get together and so if it is then just composed of several different subgroupings or whatever. But I would say maybe fact is one of them. And I'm pretty sure there is a lot of stuff within AI that I'm not aware of where they have this sort of user-driven approach to it as well. And that would also be a part of it. And of course, there's a lot of HEI research where they try to understand the use of AI technology, and that would also be part of it, even if they may not be aware of HEAI. I don't think it's super important to kind of define rigorously these different communities and say that either you're in it or you're out of it, right? I think it's more important to think of what is it that's happening there, if it's important, and then think of, okay, what are people doing that is close to that, and then try and bring those together. I'm seeing it more as a unifying thing than a exclusionary thing,
Perfect. So then to continue on this train of thought and this unifying perspective, and now I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but what would you say is a good implementation or a product that takes HCAI perspectives into perspective? So where do we see the best implementations of the values, the thoughts that HCAI conveys?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I would want to be critical there and say there's probably isn't any, and then aim it high, and we should still strive to getting there. Like you could say the same thing. What's the ideal HEI application, or like what's the best outcome of all the work that ever been done in HEI? And there's probably not any. I mean, what's the most ideal recommender system? I would ask you, and you would be like, oh, I don't know. Perhaps we should see all these things as asymptotes, right? We try to achieve them, but we can't. But I mean, it is interesting to think of like what are some examples and what's good about them or what's not good about them. Personally, I think, for instance, the most famous one that any person on the street would think of would be ChatGPT or some similar of that. I don't think that's very well designed, for the reason that it's masqueraded as an entity we can talk to, but it's not an entity we can talk to. It's kind of enforcing this anthropomorphization rather than trying to explain through the design of it that this is not something that has human capabilities.
To throw in another term here, human-centered AI, that's one thing. There's human-computer interaction. What about human AI interaction? So ChatGPT would be, I guess, an example of human GPT interaction. From your perspective, is there a distinction between HCI and human AI interaction, or are those the same? And how does it relate to human-centered AI?
Well, I think you can extract human AI interaction from HCI, of course, in the same way you can extract any technology from HCI. There's like human robot interaction where the computer then replaced with a particular type of computer, which is some sort of embodied robot. There's a human agent interaction where there is an agent where perhaps GPTs could be seen as some sort of agent. And we have anything really, like human watch interactions. Like all of these things are just other particularities of this elusive computer, right? But I think you can still apply the methods and tools that we have in HCI in all of these areas, which is the kind of the unifying thing. Yeah,
So I guess what it boils down to is that the interaction is the important aspect, and the entity that's being interacted with, whether it's a computer or AI or a robot or a car, that doesn't really matter. It's just the methods that we have from HCI, when used correctly, they apply and help with interaction in all different fields.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good perspective, I guess, and an interesting one. And I think that also resonates with Ben Schneiderman's book. I think this is an interesting thoughts and ideas about how we interact with AI and what we should consider when interacting with these systems.
I think when we start talking about particularities and concrete things, that's when it becomes more and more problematic which terms we use. I think we're using AI, and I'm trying to use it consciously quite vague. But when we start getting more and more concrete, then we should try to avoid those vague terms. Like we talked about agency or entities and agents and all of these things. Like, are they AIs? Like, what's AI here? It's GPT. We use that as well. It's a much more concrete term. I think human GPT interaction is a really interesting one. You could replace that with human LLM interaction and think about what is it to interact with an LLM. That could be a really nice, interesting field within HCI. Would that be part of HCI? Probably. But then I would think of, okay, if that's like human LLM interaction from an HCI standpoint, then we should start thinking of, okay, how should we design or how should we develop LLMs from a sort of human perspective or user-driven approach. LLMs is a technology that's been developed to be able to, the current GPT suggests how can we make them predict the next token, right, in a sequence of tokens, and improve that and make it better and better and better and get the loss to as low value as possible. But is that the best way from an HCI perspective? That could be seen as making the car go faster and faster and faster.
But for me, this sort of links to, and again, the fact movement, right? So how do we want the model to answer, to interact with us? Obviously, you want it to be, fair and transparent in some way, unbiased, right? To not point to the wrong things or express values that are not okay, right? So this sort of links to the fact movement again.
Yeah, but the question is how much of that is technology and how much of that is an application of technology, and perhaps it is the interface that is wrong. Like if we read outputs from the system as it has some sort of values, then perhaps the problem is that we are reading values from this rather than the values coming out of being wrong.
Yeah, but those values are often a reflection of the training data.
Yeah, so that if that's what you typically would say, then that's some sort of reaction. So one way to, fix that is to train it on some other data, so the values will be different. But another way to think of it is what happens if we change the interface, and what is the interface that should be changed, so we don't read values out of it. Like for instance, when it comes to GPTs or large language models, currently most systems that we use, at least, we interact directly with it, and so we think the output from it is the thing we should interact with. But what other layer could you put on top of that, both on the input and the output, so that we don't think of it as an entity that has values and ideas?
But so drawing parallels to ChatGPT, because it's just so simple to do it nowadays. There was a lot of criticism when it was launched, and there still is, about the fact that it provides answers that are incorrect, right? So is that an interaction?
Yeah, I mean, I think the issue there is with it's not clear from the design that this is a randomization machine that occasionally gets things right, right? It's not clear how it works, but it's masqueraded as an all-knowing, all-seeing entity that we can talk to, that is, universally smart in all possible ways. And obviously, the problem is not what it can do, I think, but it's our perspective and our expectations of what it should be able to do. So I mean, there's so many people are like angry at it still, like 1 year after, still like, oh, people are using it, but it gets things wrong sometimes, so people should not be using it. It's like, maybe you just need to change the perspective. And it's not, I don't think it's necessarily people's fault for doing that. I think the design has part of the blame there. I don't think there are some benefits of having a chatbot, in having that sort of going back and forth iterative way of improving the output from this system. That's the benefit. But the negative side is that, we immediately anthropomorphize, because we are talking to this thing. And what the other things we usually talk to are people. They usually get things right, or I know who they are. And if I'm talking to a doctor, I assume they have doctor knowledge, you know?
So yeah, then I mean, this sounds like an interaction based perspective. So thinking of systems that we interact with, and the way we design AI systems, and then maybe specifically chatbots like ChatGPT, but also others, there is the interaction that a chatbot invites to is that of a conversation with some form of intelligent being. And it also brings, I guess, expectations on answers being some form of reflections of truth, or at least of some value. So when we design interactions with chatbots that don't necessarily give true answers, do we need to rethink the interaction there? Is that a human computer interaction perspective that we need to take into the design of these systems, in order for people from outside of computing to get direct understanding, or at least some form of basic understanding of the expectations that the system can deliver?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's exactly right. And as you say, it invites, like ChatGPT and other chatbots, they invite the user, human in this case, into some sort of experience, and it already sets out in the shape of it, right, in the form of this interface, that you're going to talk to something, right, because it's chat is talking to something, and already there you set out the expectations. And so that's why this whole invitation into a conversation situation becomes problematic, because then of course the expectations are that this is going to have some sort of accurate responses, and it's going to be true for whatever. It's not going to talk about this. It's not inviting the user into an experience of a random sampling thing from a distribution. And the magic here, of course, is the distribution. How does it get to this distribution? But it's really masquerading that there is a distribution, right? Yeah. And that there is a sampling process going on. I mean, what I find super interesting, and when I talk about this with people, is that the language model underneath it is deterministic, right? Like you will always get the same response. The probability distribution for the next token will always be the same given the same input. And the stochastic behavior of the system is the sampling. And the sampling is, by nature stochastic. It's random. And if someone says, oh, this is a thing that's going to give random answers, then people will probably have different expectations from it. Yeah. I mean, I know talking to you, and I know that this whole episode of the podcast is, a random sampling of something, because I don't know what I'm going to say before. And if we record this again, it's going to be random. Some people will have problems with this because they will start talking about free will. But let's not go into that domain just now. But in terms of if you were to, I don't know what the interface of a large language model should be, where it's still as useful and possible to use and as open-ended as ChatGPT actually really is. But I'm pretty sure that a lot of the criticism, a lot of the critiques that it gets from a lot of people could be resolved by a different interface design, a different interaction design.
So I guess one of the questions there would be, what type of interaction should there be with a system like that? And which is, that's a question that's really difficult to answer. And thinking of the technologies and the interaction types we have today, I guess a chatbot is a reasonable implementation of an interaction with an AI. And I guess figuring out what other types of interactions or what a new type of interaction with that type of AI should look like, that's something we'll try and figure out in future episodes, I guess. All right, Mattias, I've asked many questions and put you on the spot for some time now, and I guess it's time to wrap up for today. This was the second episode of the Human-Centered AI podcast. Now we've introduced ourselves, we've given our perspectives on things. In the future, we'll strive to have guests on the podcast, so it won't just be mine and Mattias's perspectives, but also others. And with that, thank you for listening.
Thank you and goodbye.